Trump of it all, right? Um, Listen, like I said, I was glued to the screen and I was just watching it. I was like, whoa. I was listening to his speech and I just thought, this guy, yeah, Donald Trump is back. But just a few things that I wanted to kind of touch on because I was sort of interested because he's done all these different executive orders, right? Um, like on his first day, and he has he's like withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, he's withdrawn from the World Health Organization. Listen, I'm not here to debate that and what that means to Americans, but I just thought it was interesting and it kind of got me thinking, well, like, what does that mean for the African continent? That's my interest, right? Like looking at things and then putting them under the African light to be like, okay, what does it mean for the African continent, right? And particularly one of the executive orders that I wanted to touch on was they he revoked Biden's executive order, which was aimed at lowering prescription drug costs for Medicare and Medicaid patients. Um, and I think that in itself will have an influence on just the global pharmaceutical markets, right? I think it will give them a certain boldness, right? Because if there's no price controls in America, like everything cascades, right? The old saying, like when America catches a cough, the whole world catches a cold. I hope I'm saying that right. Um, but I just thought, like while the direct impact of drug availability in Africa, right, is uncertain. Like I think the potential increase in the drug prices in the United States could affect the global pricing structure, right? And if this happens, this might challenge, different African nations' access to affordable medications and um, potentially impacting their public health initiatives. So takes me back to the whole Luigi, my man who I shouldn't laugh. The CEO. I know I've had a back and forth with one of my dear friends on this. Tando, like we've had like some proper back and forth. But I think my whole thing is the murder of a CEO, right? I just like I don't even want to like touch that particular subject, but it's the point is that the murder of one CEO does not begin to make the changes that people want made, right? Um, because you're seeing it's starting with this. It's starting with the president making such an executive order that emboldens pharmaceutical companies. And if you think about the relationship between pharmaceutical companies and healthcare providers, listen, I can go on and on. But I thought that was interesting, just thinking of it from an African point of view. And also, like, one of the executive orders was to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, right? For the second time, because he did that the first time and then Biden went back. Um, and listen, I think for a continent, right, Africa, for in this case, that is highly vulnerable to climate change. I think this move may impact some of the international climate initiatives, but I think with everything that there's cost and opportunity, right? So like with the climate agreement, and some of the broader like environmental targets and net zero, I this is just my opinion. I've always thought that some of them are a bit punitive, right? Especially like to African countries and to smaller developing economies. And they're very they're very set from like a Western lens. And even though yes, it's important that everyone works towards this whole environmental goal. I have always thought that some of the costs that come with the stuff that's talked about in COP this and COP that. So, in a way, I think it will impact African countries, but at the same time, there was a cost that may be now relieved from them. Um, and linking this back to the first thing that I said about the pharmaceutical companies, I think the big takeaway from me is that really we need new leaders, right? Because you need African leaders that are going to be strategic, right? And that are going to be very deliberate and intentional with how they engage with the United States, because there are opportunities, but at the same time, there are costs, right? And also, I think another thing is just the reason we need new leaders is because we need to totally reimagine the relationship. And this kind of like big the paternal thing that the US has on on African countries, it just cannot fly, because if you think about it, like these executive orders, they're done in America, and the cascading effect that's going to be felt like across the globe, like we shouldn't be so dependent on, oh, what does this one American president think? How is this going to impact us? The whole relationship with aid, although I'm not one to say, oh, get rid of aid, like that's not me. I don't think it's helpful to frame conversations in that way, but I think it's more of a incremental thing, right? Where you increase like your reliance on other things, on production, on, you know, the collaboration of private sector and, you know, the third sector and all that sort of stuff, right? But you need people with real brain power. Like you need people that can really engage and really approach the United States as you know, a partner, and present themselves as a partner that should be respected and considered, and also present with opportunities. I always think this, right? For example, a country like Zimbabwe, I mean, we have so many issues, but if you think about it in terms of outsourcing, right? All these jobs that, like, when you call phone companies and there's a call center in India or in wherever, think about it. I think a country like Zimbabwe is so primed to have that kind of industry, right? You know, you've got a highly literate people. Our accents are very clear, like in comparison to other different accents, right? They're very clear. Zimbabweans generally just have a mild manner about them that this would work, but there are just so many factors. Like I've spoken to people who've looked into this, and you know, by the time you have to like pay this one a bribe, you know, the inconsistency with service delivery, you know, sometimes there's no electricity, there's no this, and you know, these big companies need these things to be in place and to be reliable. But anyway, I think it's just to say, yes, there's what's happening in America, but I always say, like, we need to look at it from, you know, as Africans in the diaspora, and even as Africans in Africa, like, how can we maximize and make use of these opportunities? But yes, that's my take, and it's obviously evolving. It'll be an interesting 4 years. I think we can all say that. And also, I think it was just so interesting watching Trump become president, like the inauguration and everything, like watching who attended. And I think there's this whole